Pleasure to meet you too.
Good evening again. Thanks for joining the National Intercollegiate Flying Association's Aviation Speaker Series. Tonight we have with us Nick Brice with American Airlines. And thanks for having you, Nick, and look forward to hearing interview pros and cons and what we should do, shouldn't do, and some things, some tips for everybody. So with that, thanks again for joining us tonight. And Andrew Ross is moderating again tonight as normal. Kind of filling this role here and there. So, but appreciate your work, Andrew, and thank you, Mr. Brice, and look forward to hearing everything tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Taylor. Welcome, everybody, once more to this Aviation Industry Speaker Series. As Taylor so eloquently put it, tonight we have First Officer Nick Brice with us. Nick and I go back all the way to American Eagle Airlines, back when that was in its own entity, an airline, back before it was Envoy. So, and Nick was actually part of the team that hired me on when I first started there in 2011. So it's a bit of a homecoming, so to speak, to have this conversation this evening. So we're really happy to have you. A bit of ground rules before I hand this over to First Officer Brice. We do have YouTube streaming, and I can see it in the corner of my periphery that that's playing right now. So if you have any questions that you'd like to submit to Nick, please let me know through there or any of the other mediums that you can get a hold of us, and we'll happily ask that when we get to the Q&A portion. Without further ado, though, Nick's got a bunch of information that he wants to start off this conversation with. So, First Officer Brice, thank you for coming with us today, or being with us this evening, and take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So my name's Nicholas Brice. I'm actually born and raised in California, a little town called Livermore. And I kind of had my first aha moment when I was about 5 years old. My dad had a side hustle business where he actually did aerial surveying. So he would actually get in a plane, him and his buddy, and take the door off the side of a 172, go out and take pictures of people's lands. And one day they didn't have any babysitter for me, so I got to go along with them. And I'll never forget kind of sitting in the airplane. And the first couple of things came to my mind. Number one was, why am I not flying out this open door? Because they were orbiting around this field at about 1,500 feet. Number two is, how do I get up there and start flying this thing? So from that point forward, I knew that I wanted to be a pilot. And I think everybody kind of has that aha moment that's a commercial airline pilot today. So after that, I put all my eggs in the aviation basket and kind of moved forward. And at 16, instead of getting flying lessons, instead of getting a car, I got flying lessons. So my 16th birthday, we actually went to the airport and I started flying, got formalized training. And so my mom had to go drop me off at the airport. It's kind of funny. And I was like, I couldn't even drive, but yet I could go fly a plane solo. So then after that, I looked around for different schools. I went out and looked at OU and a few others in Embry-Riddle. But San Jose State was in my backyard. So, and then in-state tuition kind of pushed me that way too, where OU was going to be like $50,000 in with Embry-Riddle, you know. So I ended up going to San Jose State, and I loved every minute of it. I graduated in 2000 and then started flight instructing. And then after I graduated, started flight instructing, unfortunately, September 11th happened. So when September 11th happened, you know, everyone kind of sat down in their seat that they were sitting in for the next 3 years. So I flight instructed a little bit longer than I wanted to. But then once the regional started hiring again, I actually got a bite before September 11th from Continental Express at the time, which they later on became ExpressJet, which later on, unfortunately, now defunct. But I got an interview with them, and they flew me down to Houston. And I remember they put us in a big circle, and they had about 25 of us in there, and they had a basket. And the basket was a question. So you'd stand up and you'd ask the question. And I remember my first question is, what would you do if a passenger complained about a hard landing? And I said, it was the captain's landing, which I thought was hilarious, right? But I don't know if everyone thought the same thing I did. And then the second question, I remember I stood up, and the question was, what if you had thunderstorms at your destination? What would you do? And that one was really long-winded. And then I had a third one. I forget what the third one was. I think it was something with customer service related stuff. Anyway, they took half of us and put us in one room. The other half, we went in another room. And unfortunately, my whole half went home. So I did not get that job that day. And then when I went home, I really was kind of bummed. And so I really regrouped, and I really kind of took a step back and figured out what about this aviation interview process, because it's unique to all other industries. Not only do we have to be technically prepared, but we also have to fly airplanes, and on top of that, be customer service, and we got to be everything. We got to have lots of different hats. So ever since then, I've been really intrigued in the aviation hiring process because it's different than any other industry. So then I really studied hard, and I used my wife and friends and bounced things off of them, bounced questions off. I even went in a mirror and bounced questions off, And then after that, I got on with Mesa and with American Eagle. So I decided to go with American Eagle. I got hired by both in the same week. So I chose to go with American Eagle. One reason was they had a base in LA. So just being from California, I wanted to stay in California for a while. So I was based in LA with American Eagle, flying the Saab up and down the coast, which was awesome flying. But then unfortunately the base started shrinking for American Eagle there in LA, and eventually did close in 13, I think. And then so I left a little bit earlier, and then I transferred over to the Embraer, flew the Embraer for a while. I took my first upgrade available, and I actually started flying the ATR out in San Juan. And that was awesome. So cool. I mean, we were going like 2,000 feet over the water, and I could see the coral down below us. And we go to St. Thomas, St. Croix, and we go to all these really cool places that people pay tons and tons of money to go to. And we'd spend the night there and have great times. And then I see it, we got messages, it's called HI6. Basically, I saw an HI6 message saying, hey, we're interviewing for people that want to be a part of the interview teams. So I applied and I interviewed, and I actually got hired as an interviewer. And that's where I met Andrew in 2011 doing interviews. We actually hired over 750 pilots that year, which was a kind of a milestone for American Eagle at the time. Then unfortunately, we declared bankruptcy a little bit later. So we did kind of have some hard times there, but I kind of stick with it, and then actually ended up doing some FM1 jobs and some other jobs for American Eagle. And then my boss went to United. So then there was an opening for director of pilot recruitment. So I took that job, and I was actually director of pilot recruitment. And that's when I kind of got to know NIFA a little bit more. San Jose State, when I graduated in 2000, we actually won the safety award. And our name's actually in the back of it. It's kind of like the women's alternates, we're on the back there. But there's so many names, you got to put them somewhere there, right? But that's one of our claim to fame for NIFA. But with the NIFA, we started doing a lot of recruiting for NIFA. And I know back in the day, American Eagle actually gave the person that was the #1 flyer an interview. Where actually when I showed up, I'm like, I'll give interviews to everybody because you all are awesome, So I was really awestruck, and I actually went out to the flight line with Lovelace, or Mr. Lovelace from UND, and got to watch the landing competitions and different things. So really, ever since then, I've been just enthralled with NIFA and thought it was such a cool deal. And I kind of wish I could go back and do a little bit more with it, but I can kind of do what I can now. We actually flew a plane out there too, and I think 14 or 15, we actually flew an Embraer out to Ohio State. So it's been really cool. So then I kept on, every time we go to job fairs, when I was director of pilot recruitment, I would change clothes into regular street clothes, and I'd go interview with everybody. I had no shame. I went to United, I went to Delta, and American, and then American called. So I actually got street hired by American Airlines. So then after I got street hired by American, I started to do recruiting again after I got off probation. And I first started in the Cadet Academy. American Airlines Cadet Academy launched, and then I would go to different openings for different things. And I do a lot of school visits where I go to schools and talk to them about becoming pilots, just get them jazzed about aviation and get more pilots in the industry. Because that's kind of like one of our main mission statements in the Cadet Academy, is actually just bring more pilots into the industry. Not necessarily all just for American Airlines. We'd love you to come to American Airlines, but definitely more pilots. Once I started doing more and more recruiting, I started getting more and more jobs inside recruiting, and now I am actually in charge of all the mentors for the American Airlines Cadet Academy. So I oversee all the pilots. So I have a lot of issues with different things with the cadets and mentors and things. And then also I'm part of the interview team. So we interview 2 to 3 times a week, and we interview about 90 right now a week. So that's a lot. We're actually looking like United to hire over 2,000 pilots this year. And 1 month, we've already put in 220 pilots. Yeah, we interview like crazy over the holidays. I mean, we didn't have a day stop, which is good. Kind of got to, as recruiting goes, you kind of got to get the good folks while you can. We kind of have a tier system there where we try and get the cream of the crop right away. Well, we can, before they go to Delta or United, like Andrew. So we with American, one of our main things is that we're hiring for is attrition right now. We're losing over 1,000 pilots a year. And out of all the big four, Southwest, United, Delta, American, American is the most top heavy, meaning we have the most amount of retirements if you look at the retirements. And we're just beginning our retirements where some Delta and United have actually kind of gone through their main high points. So actually our main points are coming up in 2023. They started 1,000 pilots a year. And that's just for 65. That's not counting people that leave early or medical out or switch jobs. I mean, I've seen some wild stuff or, do whatever. So that's the main reason why we're hiring. Also, we're hiring for growth. We have orders in for 787s. We have orders for NEOs, and we have orders for MAXs all coming this year. The 787s I've heard been delayed, and I did hear recently we switched some of the 787s to MAXs to get those a little bit quicker. Just because the international growth seems like it's not come back as quickly as they forecasted to come back. So a couple of things I wanted to talk about today was kind of do's and don'ts and what you should do, what you shouldn't do with regards to the interview process, because I've probably hired over 1,000 pilots or so and interviewed a good handful of those. So I kind of wanted to talk to everybody about what you can do, what you can't do, and it's all for free. That's the best part, I'll be your Emerald Coast or Judy Tarver today. With the interview process, I tell everyone, get a mission statement, get an opening statement, get a monologue. And the monologue can be in 3 different forms. You have a 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute. So I kind of gave you the 5 minute one of mine, where I can give you a much more Cliff Notes version of just 1 minute. And that's kind of like when you get in the cockpit, hey, where are you from, and you can kind of just give that quick 1 minute one. Where the 5 minute one, you kind of want to go through everything and talk about the aha moment, like we talked about. Where you really decided that you wanted to aim your guns towards the aviation and really go full throttle towards it. 3 minute one's kind of like, in passing or, social settings, and the 5 minutes would be more like presentation wise. After that, I tell everyone to start a story bank. So start your stories, because I know when I was even at San Jose State, I can remember some stories of things that happened to me. And one thing that I did wrong with the Continental Express, which I've learned, is that there's actually a format to answer questions, to tell stories, and that's a STAR format, STAR. So it stands for situation, task, action, result. And you can actually say result or resolution. What did you learn from that? And you have to try and stay in the R of the most, meaning what did you learn and would you do anything different kind of at the end. And I can give you a good example of that. So when I was at San Jose State, I went out on a solo private pilot practice out the practice area, and I was practicing power on, power off stalls. I did power on stalls, and inadvertently I go into a spin, just like that. It was so quick. I mean, I just remember it was like 1 minute I'm here stalling, the next minute I'm spinning towards the ground. And I remember we talked about it in lectures and different things. And I knew rudders was what controlled it all from talking to my friends and things that have stalled and spun. So the first thing I do is kind of like let go and let God, I kind of just said, okay, this is going to happen. So then I saw a house go by one way, and I'm like, oh, let me push on the rudder. So after I let go of the controls, I pushed on the rudder, and then the house went faster. Why? I'm like, oh, that's the wrong way. So I pushed on the other right rudder, and then the house slowed down a little bit, but it didn't slow down completely. I'm still spinning with it. So I go like, just put it to the floor. Put it to the floor. I stopped spinning and I recovered. I lost about 2,000 feet. I started at 4,000, went down about 2,000. I don't know how many spins I did, but then when I did finally start recovering, my audio came back. I don't know if you know, when you go into stressful things, sound or your audio is one of the first things to go. So then the engine was still at full throttle. I was like, whoa. So I brought the power back. That's another reason why I was probably spinning so fast. So I'm like, I'm going to get this thing. I'm not going to let this thing deter me. So I climb back up to 4,000 and then I do it again. And this time I spin again, but I recover inverted. So I'm like, whoa, I'm doing something wrong, right? So I recover, I go back, I land, and my flight instructor's sitting down there waiting for me. He's like, hey, how'd it go? I was like, man, I just spun the crap out of a 152. He's like, what? He's like, you're lucky to be alive, because most people stall spin accidents are actually the #1 cause of general aviation accidents. So I was like, well, I went up there, power on stalls, did this, departure stalls. And then he goes, did you keep the ball centered? I'm like, oh, you got to keep the ball centered? So I was like, oh, shoot. So I didn't stay coordinated. Therefore, the one wing dipped and spun in. So ever since that point, I've been really, really diligent about rudder usage. And to the point where I've taught all my students about rudder usage, and I show them spins, and I do different cross control stalls and things when we first go up to show them what a spin's like, just in case they were to follow my footsteps and spin it while they're private, and before private and solo flight. So even at the airliners, I still, even though we don't use very many rudders, a lot of people will put their feet on the floor after takeoff in a swept wing airplane, but I still keep my feet up there and I still watch the ball. And I'm really, really cognizant of what's going on with regards to the rudder movement. So that's what I really, really learned. I mean, going back, I guess I could have, asked my instructor to do a spin or things like that, but I'm kind of glad it happened, because therefore I could kind of learn from it, move on, and teach others my mistakes and kind of move on from that. So there's the STAR method. So I told you the situation, I set it all up. I told you about the task, going in the spin, the action, what I did to recover, and the result of what I learned with the rudders. So you can see that's the STAR method. There's actually a Wikipedia page if you guys do want to look it up. But that's kind of, get a format, get a structure, and that way any question that they ask, you can go into your story bank and then use the STAR method to go ahead and answer all your questions, and do it in a logical manner, chronological, and to make sense. Because I know as a person interviewing people, sometimes I'll hear stories and people will leave out bits and pieces of things and they don't really have any structure to it. They're kind of random and sporadic, and then I have lots of follow-up questions to come afterwards. So that's kind of my big point with regards to when you guys do interviews. And this actually transcends to everything. When you think about it, every interview they ever go on, they're always going to ask you 3 questions. Number 1, tell me about yourself, right? That's the first question we ask actually in the American Airlines interview. Tell me about yourself, right? So that's the monologue we talked about. Another one is, why do you want to work for us, right? Why do you want to work for American Airlines? And then the third would be, why should we hire you and not the 20,000 people we have on file, right? So those questions you'll get no matter what interview. Even if you go to CBS, I bet they'll even ask those similar questions. So already know that, right? And then already have a game plan of what that answer is going to be, and kind of practice it with people and go over it and fine tune your craft. So let's go through some do's and don'ts too of an interview. I know I've kind of looked through some of the questions Andrew had already sent over, but that was one of them, the do's and don'ts. Number 1 is definitely stay professional. I tell everyone, once you leave your house to the interview, that's where the interview begins. It doesn't end until you come back into your house. Because I've actually had gate agents call me when I was director of pilot recruitment and tell me this person was being an ass, this person's being rude. And guess what? I didn't end up hiring that person, because if they're rude to the gate agent now, just think when they are hired, it's gonna be even worse. Or I've heard the opposite, where a gate agent called and they said, hey, this person's pilot number, PNR we call it, is not working. Can you do something? I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. And they said, oh, this person would be terrific about it too. They're so nice about it. They're being real. They were actually going to buy their own ticket. And I'm like, no, tell them not to, So that's the extremes that we kind of go to. So they will actually contact me. Same thing, like the people at the front desk have actually called me and said, oh, this person is so nice. Or this person's slouching, this person's using slang or cussing or different things. So really, really, really try and be on your best behavior when in interviews. So with that, try not to use jargon, try not to use slang, try not to cuss. Those are definitely don'ts. Try not to slouch or kind of kick way back in your chair. But it's not like the old school, I don't know whether it's United or Delta, but they used to have 2 chairs, a rocking chair and a stiff chair. And then you sit in one of the chairs and they have you actually tell them why you picked the rocking chair versus the upright chair. Where we don't do that, American, there's no games involved. We actually try our best not to play games. We actually have been through everyone in there has been through the process at some point in time, so they know what it's like to be in your shoes, and we try to make it as comfortable as possible. So don't take that comfortability as a way to relax your guard, so to speak, and kind of go off the reservation. But definitely dress the part. I have seen actually people wear tennis shoes before, and that person pulled it off perfectly. I mean, they were dressed beautifully. The shoes matched the suit, and they had white like rims around the shoes. They're kind of like Vans, I guess, kind of style. But man, I was like, we tell people not to wear tennis shoes, but this person like pulled it off, And that's the thing, is like kind of know your comfort area with regards to style, and if you need help, go to Macy's or Nordstrom's or something and ask them for it. But definitely the standard is, a blue or black suit with a red or blue tie and white t-shirt. Now, I have seen other ones of that, and usually when you do like with a checkerboard or like I always call them tablecloth shirts, whenever people wear those types of shirts, they tend to stick out a little bit more. Or if you have lots of pins on your lapel, I mean, one pin's probably all right, especially an American flag or something. But if you have tons and tons of pins, it kind of, the person interviewing may start getting distracted and start looking at different areas. So you're looking to kind of blend in that factor. You don't really want to stick out and say, oh, which person are you interviewing? Oh, the person in the gray suit, But again, if you can pull it off, you can pull it off. And I kind of tell everyone just find your comfort area within that. So also I tell everyone to use a prep service. You know, I know it costs a little bit of money, but you know, especially when you get to the major airlines, you only get really one shot at it. Sometimes you don't know what's wrong with you until you have someone kind of look at you, or someone can give you critical feedback, you know, that really help you in the interview process. And it's a small investment for your future. You know, usually major interviews, you only get one. So I'd really spend all the time and money you can to be able to get to that point. So with that, I think we've gone through most of the do's and don'ts there, Andrew. I don't know if we want to turn it over to some other questions.
Certainly. Thank you for that, Nick. I echo and have that's been absolutely my experience as well through most of this, all of this stuff in my own career. So you hit on a lot of interesting points that had been part of the questions that were submitted. So I'm going to try to I'll try to cut out the ones that you did hit, but there were a couple that might mesh a little bit into reinforcement. So one that you mentioned, NIFA, you really like seeing that on a resume, but what other types of things do you like seeing on a resume? What helps somebody differentiate? One of the common things I get as well, I've been flying a plane for 7 years and all this time, and you know, they should just know that I'm a good pilot because I've been flying for 7 years. Well, it's all a resume, right? So it all looks the same. So what's the differentiation? What do you like seeing when that comes to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there's never one item, right? It's usually being a well-rounded person. Hold on one second. Sorry, my kid just came over from school and he's singing. So there's never one item on a resume that really sticks out, unless it's like, I've seen like astronaut time, you know, I've seen like Air Force One pilot, or, you know, like that super niche, you know, or we interviewed a guy the other day that did the air show. He's an air show F-35 pilot. And that was just like, wow, you know, it's like, so besides those like super unique things, I would say that you need a well-rounded, meaning that you need to do extracurricular activities, because we all have, like Andrew said, we all have the same qualifications. We all have been flying for 7 years. We all have 5,000 hours. We all have the same things. So what differentiates you from the next person? And that's what you do on your time off. I say that's what differentiates you. Do you go out and do you golf? Do you go out and help out a soup kitchen, or do you go out and you know, I don't know, help a family business? Or, you know, and that's the thing that I like to hear during interviews, is the personal aspects of things, not so much the rote answers. I like it to be more of a conversation. I always tell everyone it's like turning off the stereo light at flight level 360, and we're just sitting up in the cockpit and 3 pilots talking, you know, and I like that more interaction rather than just boom, boom, boom. Okay, you know, this is what I would do if I'm going into holding, you know, or if I'm going to divert this XYZ. I'd rather hear it more from personal experiences, personal, like I told you about those story banks, to try and add that personal edge, because that's what makes it different. That we're hiring human beings, we're not hiring robots. So it's well-rounded. It's not just the flight hours, it's not just the school you went to, it's the other things. So we do look at the bottom, we do look at activities. People say, oh, I don't put anything down in activities because I don't have it. Well, yeah, you do. I mean, I wouldn't put down, I mean, I've seen really wild things, like I like to watch TV. I've seen one, and one of the wild ones I've seen is I like to sleep. I think we all like to sleep, right? But that one is one of the wildest I've ever seen on a resume.
That's great. Well, I've got one that just came in on YouTube, and it is do you, and I think you're really good to answer this because you've done both sides of this house. Do you think using a prep service is worth it for a regional airline as well?
I would say no. And I would say no, just that it's kind of the entry level. And then when I was at Eagle, our standards were a little bit different with regards to interviews. We knew that potentially this was your very first job ever, especially like if you went straight to college and you flew the whole time and then you graduated and you were a CFI or you built time. And especially when we were doing interviews with Andrew, where you could hire somebody at 250 hours, you know, this is really your first job sometimes. So we knew that going into it. And so we knew that sometimes their answers weren't really polished and things like that. And again, we were just looking for the person, and from doing interviews a lot, we'd find ways to pull information from people or to try and find the real person that we're interviewing. Where I would say when you go to the major, to use that service. And I would say, you know, if you do go to one of the LLCs, say JetBlue, Spirit, or well, I guess Frontier and Spirit are the same now. But if you go to one of those mid, the LLCs, I would say use it then. But then you kind of learn all the traits and the paperwork and how to answer it and get your story bank built so that you can only really do it once. I don't think you need to do it, for multiple jobs.
Good, very good. Thank you. You kind of talked about a lot of pins. Is there something you should avoid on a pin? Because even if it's one pin, it could be the wrong pin. So is there something that's generally conservative? You said like, well, the American flag is an obvious yes, that's a good one to put on there. You don't have to name names, obviously you can't, but is there anything you've seen that you just like, why did you think that was okay coming to this interview today?
No, I'm trying to think. No, because I've seen like NGP, I've seen Women in Aviation, I've seen OBAT pins, I've seen NIFA pins, I've seen all those pins. I would just say if you have a lot of pins, that's where it kind of starts distracting, where you have like the off space. I don't know if you guys seen that, but where the guy has all those flare on there, right? Where you go overboard, then that's kind of distracting me from watching you. But I think one on each side, or maybe two max. Because I have American flag one on mine from doing Snowball Express and some other volunteer work, and that kind of differentiates me, saying that I've helped out in these different areas. So I mean, I see the pride in it too, where you're part of these organizations, you want people to know about it. And a lot of times too, when we go to these organizations, we use a tier system in American where it's points. So basically, the more things you have, more points, the higher up in tier you'll go. Which we're talking about the whole rounded people, right? That goes back to the whole rounded part, where if you go to one of these conferences and you're a member of this organization, we actually will give you more credit for it. And we actually will target, like we'll go back with all the resumes and look at them all. Like we just had an NGPA in Palm Springs, and we this week we'll probably start sending out invites to the ones that got real high grades on our interviews.
Excellent. I've got another one that also came in. It's also a great question. And I maybe answer this in two levels, but turbine time, how valuable is that type of time versus if you have, say, throw out 10,000 hours of DC-3 time just to throw out radial piston aircraft. But what's the value in that for your total time matrix?
I always wondered that too. I was like, why can't when I graduated college, like why can't I just go fly 777s right now? I'm good. I can do this. Where it is definitely like a tiered system. It's definitely blocks, building blocks, that each plane you get into bigger and bigger and bigger, it just becomes an extension of you. Where I would say that more planes is good, but it's not always true. But I say the faster the planes go or the higher the planes go is probably better. Just because you experience things that you've never seen before, especially with like rapid decompression or pressurization problems. Or routing issues or thunderstorms. Because when I was a flight instructor, I was really ignorant to weather. That's what I would say was my biggest downfall. And it was all on the job training with weather, of how to avoid it and where to go, which way to go, or go that way and get your butt kicked. And you're like, I'm not going that way ever again. Or, go through sucker holes and get kicked again. And you're like, nope, I'm going around. Where I would say that the time does matter, experience does matter. But I noticed that it's been going down more and more every month with us, because currently we have around 5,000 applications on file at American Airlines. We actually had an influx here recently where we announced that we're going to hire over 2,000 pilots in a year. And that's where it kind of started showing that, hey, if you got on with American right now, the time to upgrade is going to decrease, the time to major or to the wide body is going to decrease. So we got a real insurgence of we actually got an increase of like over 2,000 applications in a couple of months, which is really, really awesome. So it kind of shows that American right now is kind of like the place to be for, if you're going to go now, because your upgrade time will be about 2 years for narrow body and 10 years for wide body. Currently, we have a 3-year captain based in New York, and we have a 30-year captain on the 777. So you can see those are, the wide body will go down a little bit, but the narrow body will go down a little bit, but the wide body will go down tremendously. Where you have 30 years just to be captain on a wide body right now, but it's dropping every day. Where I pulled the numbers in October, and we were going to end up retiring over 120 people between October 31st and the end of the year last year. That's averages out to 4 pilots a day. That's a lot of water gun salutes. So back to the time, I would say that time does matter. I would say turbine time does matter. And, I would say right now, currently it's about 500 hours of turbine PICs, the goal to get on with American. So if you can make it to a regional that was going to get you that upgrade time quick, and then get the captain to get that PIC turbine is going to be the trick.
Excellent. I've got a couple questions coming in online, but one thing I did want to ask before we start, because this is probably a good thing to, and I probably should have put this as one of the first questions, but can you give a brief synopsis of the American interview process, sort of from start to finish, from the moment they apply to getting the invite and then subsequent?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So the first process obviously is you can go onto any of our websites, aa.com, type in careers or pilot jobs AA into Google, and you'll come up with pilot credentials. That's the website that we use. It's called Pilot Credentials, and it's free to use. And you can actually start it today. We have a large number of applications separate from those other ones I talked about that are not qualified, or people that are just testing the waters, or use it for a logbook I've seen. But you can go on there and set up a profile for free, and you can go in and put in all your hours, put in all your jobs you've had, everything, put in get recommendations and things like that, and start building it today. So then after that's built and then you become qualified, they will actually then have you do I call it the happy test. I don't know if we call it that. I call it the happy test. And what it is basically kind of like the Minnesota, I forget what the test is called, but it's basically a psyche test in a way. And one thing I want to say is all these tests have been taken by American Airlines pilots. And I actually just got the email recently to try and redo this. So it's constantly, we're taking the test, and that's the litmus test that you're graded upon. You're not graded upon some Albert Einstein or something like that. You're graded on normal everyday line pilots to set the standard for all these tests. So with the personality test, we've actually found that with this personality test, if you do good on it, you actually fit in well with American Airlines. You fit the culture, you fit the same kind of values, same kind of beliefs and stuff. Where we found that cockpits are actually we have decreased amount of issues with pro standards with regards to that. So it's really kind of scientific in a way. So then the next part is it's called the pilot skills test. Once you get past that marker, the happy test, and then you get past obviously the application review of your application. So then the next with the pilot skills test, it actually used to be manual. We used to fly people in and you do it before your interview, but now we actually have it mobile now. It's on an iPad, and there's about 6 or 7 different areas, and it tests different things like mathematics. It tests weird kind of, I kind of give the best analogy is doing an ILS approach in Chicago all the way down to minimums. That's the best analogy I can give you. Because I've flown a approach into Chicago when it's snowing like crazy and you're dark and you're going down to 200 feet and you got to land on, 2-2 right, the short one. And, it's like everything's on you. So, and one thing with it's actually learned. So once you master a different subject, because they'll have you kind of keep 2 X's together, or they'll have you keep a ball inside of a box or whatever. And then every time you get better at it, it actually makes it harder. Every time you get master a different area, it gets harder and harder. Just like the math questions, math start off really easy and then it gets really, really harder. So and you walk out of there wondering if you can even fly airplanes because it keeps getting difficult and difficult. I was like, man, this is crazy, but you'll never master it. That's the frustrating part, right? But just going into it, know that it does get harder and harder. So that's good. That means you're doing good. If it gets easier, it actually will, when you start doing bad, actually will get easier. So if you're getting easier, that means you're, oh shoot, I'm not doing as good now. So with these tests, again, we found that you probably won't need as much sim time with those tests. Also with the first test, the happy test, I forgot to say too, is integrity. That's one of the main things it's testing. To see if you'll ride up to the flaps if you overspeed them, to see if you'll help out a customer and take them to the gate or tell them about the gate, or will you just blow them off and brush by? So those questions are really kind of integrity. Do you do the right thing when no one's watching? So the pilot skills test, again, we try to sim time. That's what basically that one kind of runs down to. And then the third piece, once we get all those markers checked, we go to the next third piece is the actual face-to-face interview where we'll fly you out to American Airlines. And then we do an HR, which is basically a regular HR person, non-pilot, will interview you. And they have about 10 questions. I don't really do that interview, so I don't know what any of those questions are, but I assume that they are the 3 that I told you about. Tell me about yourself. Who are you? Why do you want to work here? I know they have you explain different things kind of in layman's terms. And then the pilot to pilot interview. So then we have two pilots, and usually they'll be tailored to who you are. Meaning, if you're from military, usually we'll have at least one military on the board. Same thing, women. We try and keep women. We try and really tailor who's interviewing you to somebody that on there that has experience and that can attest to what you're saying. And then the third part is we give the CJO. And right now, CJOs we give on the day. But if you don't pass or don't hit certain markers, we actually go to the pilot board, and the pilot board actually will decide. So I've seen that's pretty good success. It's a large portion that people that have something missing or something along the way happened, and then the pilot board will review everyone's stuff and get a more global issue or idea and see if they want to hire you or not. But the success has been really great out of that one. I've seen very few people fall out from the last process. And right now we're looking at about 6 weeks from interview to class. And we're doing 70 a week right now. So it's kind
unbelievable.
crazy
That's
fun.
incredible. It's just an incredible time. So this question kind of pairs with the last question, and then this last previous question. But from the standpoint of when you go to a convention and you talk to an American recruiter, is it in order to be put and gain points for it and be part of that system, do you need to already have your application on file?
Good question. Yes, 100%. Because what happens is we cross-reference to see if you have an application on file, so we can kind of get some deets on you, some details on you. Also, when we look at your resume, we need to upload the score to whatever we did in the interview. So yeah, we need to do it. And I actually didn't have an application on file for a little bit, and then there was some crusty whole captain of American Eagle says, "Do you want to be like me?" It's like, you better put in your application. And then 6 months later, I was working in American. It's kind of crazy. So definitely put the application in. Timing, luck, and I hate to say this part, but who you know is kind of what I say all the time. So timing is now. You need to do it now rather than later.
So that's actually a great question. Then let me follow that up with one more. Is there any drawback from putting your application on file if you're not in high school, but if you're in college?
Yeah. No, there's no drawback. My cadet actually started his before he even started working for Envoy. And then he uses it now. He's at Envoy and he updates it every month. So he uses it kind of like we were talking about with the logbook. So he kind of uses it as a logbook because it is real difficult. I don't know if you ever used it before, but to put your flight time in, it's really tedious, and it's asked for things that normally you don't ask for, kind of thing, or in an order you don't ask for, where it takes time to be able to decipher that time to put it in the correct, to have it accurate. And one thing too, if I could talk about, I forgot to kind of mention, is we do a logbook review too. We'll review all your logbooks. And in that review, we check over 6149s, that's retest after failures. And it's amazing that people will sometimes not even know they failed something, especially at a 141 school, where you don't really know if you failed it. You just repeat the lesson, where the place actually has 100% pass rate. So I tell everyone, knowledge is power. Really go in your logbook and really make sure it's pristine and clean, and look for 6149s. And any 6149, which is retest after failure, put that down on the application, because that's really bad when someone shows up and they fail something, but then they put under failure 0. So that's kind of frustrating on our part. Again, we kind of think about, well, again, if this person overspit the flaps, would they tell anyone? But there has been errors, and I had it at American Eagle where this guy swore up and down. He's like, never failed anything. So we always pull their full airman file too, the FOIA, which is everything you've ever given the FAA. We get it. And we go over it and we cross-reference it to what you've put down in your application, what we've seen in the interview. And if anything's different, then that's kind of where we get, oh no. We've got his full airman file back, and the guy didn't fail anything. His flight instructor put down 6149, where you're supposed to count 6139, which is you're ready for the test. So again, knowledge is power.
Well, there's nothing like that to give you a heart attack on an interview. I'm sorry, I was going to repeat, or I'm going to ask something just to clarify. Does the application need to be done, or does the profile need to be done for the points? Because I guess there are two separate things where you're just building an American profile.
You don't need to hit submit right away. You can wait till you're ready to hit submit to publish. We have a publish button basically. So we'll see that you filled out an application, but it doesn't, we can't see anything past your name. It says there's a profile being created, but they haven't allowed us to see it yet. So the publish, I'd probably wait until you get a little bit farther along.
Okay.
Until at least a regional or until at least a corporate job where you're gaining some turbine experience or some kind of bigger than Cessna time, you know.
But will that have, you would need to have it published by the time you're going to talk to you guys at, okay, that's what I want to make sure I was asking appropriately, because they were asking for clarification.
Yeah, where I've had people come in American Line and, you know, they're not even at a regional yet, and they just are having advice. So I wouldn't say that you have to, but if you're looking for American to kind of grade you, then I would say that you would need to publish it. But I've had people come and say, you know, hey, I'm having issues and I'm having trouble. Which regional, you know, American's my end goal, but which regional do you suggest I go to? So that's where we can kind of give you advice that we've been down this path. And I always kind of use the analogy of, have you ever walked through a grocery store and try to step on all the brown tiles or all the tan tiles? You know what I mean? Or you skip along. So everyone's kind of has their own path in aviation. And so that's why it's good to have mentors and advice to show how to go through that path. Oh, mute. You're muted.
That's the first time I've done that on this show, and I've been doing it for over a year. That's embarrassing.
That's good.
I was just making sure I was answering all of this person's questions before they have to hop off. But one of the things that I think I want to go back a little bit to the interview process, and we'll dip back to American to close this out. What's one thing that you wish you'd seen more of on an interview that you currently don't see much of?
I would say being the human, being the personal stories. I love the personal stories, especially when they bring different people into it and tell these stories about their mother or sisters or brothers or, you know, things, the more personal aspects. I love that part. And it seems like the prep companies don't really want you to use too much personal information, but I love the personal information. I love learning who that person is that I'm interviewing. And I love the conversation styles. And I wish people would ask me more questions. That's probably the biggest thing. I wish people would ask me more questions, especially like during the question itself, you know, of the tell me a time wins, you know, where you have that conversation style answer rather than just you talk, I talk, you talk, I talk. Where I love it where it's just a conversation. I'd love it where they tell personal things, and I'd love it when they ask questions. Those are the biggest things that I wish I saw more of in the interview.
Excellent. So one of the questions, this came from these two, well, there's one question I'm going to ask now came from one of our students. How have pilot and aircraft retirements shaped your position when looking for the next generation of pilots?
That's a good question because, you know, at American Eagle, we looked at different things because, you know, OU had all glass. So whenever we hired somebody from OU, we had to make sure that ATR wasn't in the mix because they would go from all glass to six pack and they would have a heck of a time in training because they've never seen it before, right? Well, at American, we had the MD-80 too, where we had to kind of, you know, it was interesting times when we had the MD-80 because same thing, six pack is actually worse than a six pack. But where we had issues with training where people were always on glass and they go to the steam. So it's always good to go from steam to glass, but it's hard to go to glass to steam. So with our fleet now being down to just forward hypes, it's really helped us out where they're all glass now. They're all modern jet aircraft. So I don't think we have that issue anymore of, you know, looking for certain people that have that glass time versus six pack time. Yeah. So what was the other part of that, Andrew?
So the other half of that was when looking for the next generation of pilots. So I think the question is somewhat twofold: is how are your retirements, the aircraft retirements, impacting how you're looking at people at pilots? So
okay, good. Yeah. So like I said, we're retiring over 1,000 pilots a year starting next year, which is crazy. So those retirements we're going to be hiring for a long period of time. Our attrition alone is going to be 1,000 pilots a year for the next few years. And that's the point, is like, where do we get these pilots from? And that's one reason why we like to go to NIFA and go to these different events. We want those top tier, you know, high caliber candidates to come to American Airlines. And one good thing about American is that high attrition. So you will become senior really, really quickly. Currently we have in the next 10 years, we'll lose 60. In the next 15, we'll lose 75. So that's most everyone I'm probably talking to is wheelhouse is the next 10 to 15 years. So you see, it's a real paradigm shift that we're going to be having, and that's just retirement. So that's not counting, you know, different things that happen in different life happens to different people, right? So it's huge. And then, you know, we're going to be one of the youngest fleets. We already are currently the largest Airbus operator in all the world. But we'll probably be pretty soon one of the youngest fleets because we're getting a lot of Neos and Maxes and 787s. Where it's kind of weird that our 777 is actually some of our older airplanes, which is kind of weird to think about. So I'd say that it's huge. The retirements of our aircraft are going to be minimal because we're wanting to expand.
Excellent. So we're at the last about 9 minutes. So one of the things I've got one real question, and well, they're both real questions, but I got one question that was submitted. The other one is a question that's default that I always ask our outgoing guests. So the final question, then this one was again submitted by a student. What is the number one reason American is the best place to pursue a career as a pilot? And I loved ending with it because it's a flip on the same question that you ask your candidates.
Oh yeah. So I would say that the best reason to work for American Airlines is the world's yours. You can do whatever you want on American Airlines. We fly everywhere. We have all different types of equipment. One nice thing is too, you can bid from equipment. You can be a 777 captain one day, and next day you could transfer over and be a 737 FO. I mean, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. I've seen a lot of people switch from domestic to international, like they want to go international south during the winter. Summertime, you know, they do different things, you know, or they want to go to the islands during the wintertime, and then they'll fly north during the summertime to stay cool. And then, so with our bidding stuff, you know, we can do whatever you want. That's the beauty is that you could live in LA 1 month, and then a couple months later you could be in New York. And a couple months after that, you can be in Miami or Chicago. So having our bases in the Southern Belt is really nice, where you can transfer around, you can move around. And then where we fly all over the United States, and we fly all over the world. At any one point in time, we have multiple aircraft up in the air. We even fly up over the North Pole, up over Russia, through China and stuff, which just kind of blows my mind. I always thought it'd be quicker to go the other way, but we have some of the newest equipment, like I talked about. Our pay is really, really good. Right now, we're in contract negotiations, so hopefully we'll spur up to the top here. But then, of course, United Delta, and we'll create this pattern bargaining is what they call it, where the next Delta or United will jump over us, and then we'll leapfrog. But it brings the pay up for everyone, and that's what's going to happen with this pilot shortage. The pay is going to go up. But one nice thing is we kind of froze our retirement account for the people that had it. And so now we putting everything in your 401k, and it just seems like lately they've just been trying to throw money at you to do things, which is awesome. It's good. You know, it's definitely a pilot's market. And being in American Airlines, I feel like I have the backing of my company, and my standards and my beliefs are kind of in line with what they believe in, and I feel like we're destined for great things.
Thank you. All right. I lied. I've got one more that came through here at the last second, but I think it's a quick one. So I'll try to see it. I don't know if you have the figure right off the top of your head, but you mentioned the 5,000 applicants that were on file at American. Currently, do you know how many of those meet the actual minimums per the guideline? Yeah, I was afraid you wouldn't.
I don't. I mean, those generic numbers, who knows if they're even right or not? I get them from my boss. So, and I know that they did increase with this recent news of the 2,200 we're going to hire in a year, and proof that when one month we put in a boatload of people. So proof's in the pudding on that one.
Fair enough. I wrestled whether or not to ask that, but the final question that I have is, what one piece of advice would you wish you would have gotten as you had started your career that you would like to give right now?
Well, I guess it's the one that I actually did get, is seniority is everything, and life happens sometimes, where if I go back to I always wrestle that, what if I went back and tried to hustle more before September 11th, what would I have gotten, or what would I have done? And I don't think it would have changed much. I do tell everyone though to treat it like a job and try and get to the majors as quick as possible, because just coming from a person that's been along the path, is once you're at a major, your life is way, way different. It's night and day comparison. They don't micromanage you. They don't look over you. You kind of can do what you want a lot more, and the pay's a lot better. It's kind of weird. Like in the beginning, when you're a CFI, you don't get paid that much. And then when you're the 777 captain, I think you're kind of paid a little bit over, but it's nice, right? But I just definitely think that the pay is a lot better, and seniority is what gets you to that point. Is going, and I think you got to follow your heart. You can ask tons and tons of people what you want to do or which way you should go, but following your heart, you're never going to go wrong with that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Nick, that's about all the time we've got. This all the questions we have. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
No, I just tell you guys just to keep flying as much as you can. Never pass up a time to go flying. Go out there and hit it hard. That's the best advice, to give you guys.
Excellent. Excellent advice. Well, everybody back at home, thank you for watching us. If you're going to listen to us in the future, thank you again. Thanks for listening in the future. If you have any questions, you can email me at andrew.ross@nifa.aero, and we will happily get forwarded on to Nick to see if he can answer it. With that, everybody be safe, stay safe. It's been a very weird winter, and I know there's storms moving all over the place this week too. So we have a couple more regional competitions coming up to finish up, and we'll finally have the full list for nationals at 2022 in May. So once more, thank you, Nick and American Airlines, for being here with us today, and we'll catch up with everybody soon.